Gregory Allen Ballard,
I, Gregory Allen Ballard,
do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear.
8 years after saying those words for the first time, Greg Ballard is now just days away from leaving office, and he's sitting down with us to talk about his legacy and the challenges still ahead for the city. Thank you so much for joining us on this holiday weekend. You can also join us on Twitter right now at our official handle @IndyThisWeek. We're talking this week about Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard, now just 5 days from leaving office, and making big news as he does. This week, vetoing a plan that would have given pay raises to council members. Just before issuing that veto, he sat down with our Rafael Sanchez, looking back 8 years on the 25th floor.
Mayor, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
After 8 years, what is your single biggest success on the 25th floor?
I don't know if there's a single things. I really don't think in those terms. I will tell you there's a couple things I'm really proud of. One is I think we created a new generation of leadership. I had a lot of people up here did a tremendous job. People like Ryan Vaughn and Michael Heber and Jason Cloth and Darren Kintner, and I could go, I hate to leave anybody out, but I mean, there's people like that are going to be around for a long time. They're already in important positions already throughout the city of Indianapolis, and they will be around for a long time, for the next 30 or 40 years. So I'm really proud of that fact. I also think there's a sense of optimism in the city. There's a sense of the future, that we're moving, that we're kind of a cutting edge type of city now. Because we pushed on certain things and kind of look toward the future, and so I'm proud of all that, frankly.
What things then are those things that you believe will lead us into the future that you were able to have a hand in?
Well, clearly the Blue Indy and Vision Fleet and those things were first cities really to do that. Those are now being adopted throughout the country. There's a lot of talk. Both those companies are now talking throughout the company, and I just found out that Vision Fleet was put on the GSA schedules, which gives them federal credibility. So there's a lot of that's going on in that regard. But you can look at how we're doing placemaking in the city also, really kind of cutting edge stuff with Mass Ave, Fountain Square, lots of stuff like that, the trails, and all the bicycle culture that was growing up. That's a national story too. People talk about that all the time across the nation. So just things like that. I think education reform, you know, we're still a charter school authorizer, I think it's still the only mayor in the country that has that. We're just kind of cutting edge in lots of ways. Lots of national stories have resulted in that. I get asked to speak all the time about what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it. And there's a buzz about Indianapolis. Once you get outside the city, there's kind of a buzz about Indianapolis across the country now, like what's happening there. And I think that helps us quite a bit. 90%
of the city's budget is on public safety already. This new mayor-elect is coming in as sort of the law and order mayor. What more can be done if already so much money is being dedicated to public safety? Is there extra dollars somewhere? Is there anything extra that can be done to really tackle what has been an issue? I mean, this issue of rising crime.
Well, I mean, there's always more to be done, but if you take money away, I mean, it's 92% of the available budget now between public safety and the criminal justice system, so I'm not sure how much you can move around too much. I would like us to focus on looking at the at-risk children coming up. That's why pre-K was so important. That's why, you know, what Eskenazi is doing in the 0 to 3-year-old range is very important. Those make a difference into the future. You won't see the results for 15 to 20 years, but those will really make a difference. I still believe mandatory minimums are important. I'm not sure the state's going to go there, but I really would like them to. Violent crime would be significantly down if we had mandatory minimums at a certain level. But the really violent people are already, I'm afraid that we don't do a good job of separating the truly violent individual from the guy who just needs a little bit of help. Sometimes those sentences seem very similar for very dissimilar crimes. And I still believe if you use a gun offensively in the commission of a crime, you need to go away for a long time.
Can the city of Indianapolis survive another RFRA debate as we saw earlier this year in the State House? Because that was tough.
And this was very difficult, and it was, put it this way, every mayor in this city should feel the weight of 40 years on their shoulders. I certainly did. And I'm sure Mayor Hogsett will do the same way. Will feel the same way. You think of all the people who built up the city to a certain point, and you get to a point where it was very close, where a lot of that was going to be destroyed. It was very difficult.
Some people say that that was just media.
That was not media.
Media was making this all
That was
up.
not media
that
making it
the
up.
media was fueling this.
That was not, none of that is true.
And I ask that because obviously you're on the 25th floor. You have to deal with Salesforce and Eli Lilly and Cummins, who's coming downtown. Without betraying any trust that you had with those folks, was this a media event, or was this truly, were we on the brink of something?
It was not the media event. Conventions, sporting events, so much of how the city built up over the last 40 years was at risk. Anybody says otherwise, I'm sorry. I think they're just wrong. So I know we have to go through this again, but let's not forget that, a third of the state's economy is the region, and Indianapolis is obviously a big part of that. So we need to make sure all those things that we have built up over the last 30 to 40 years, the great reputation that we have, continues. So I know we have to go through it again, but I hope to get there very fast and not have to go through all this debate.
So what's your message then to the majority? It's your party in charge at the State House, both in the House and the Senate, the governor's office, the Speaker.
My message to them is, look at everybody under the age of 35 who's wondering, what is this all about? Why are we even arguing about this? Ask those people. Ask the young adults how they feel about this. You can see where the future is going. There's no question about it. Half the adults feel there that everybody under the age of 35 what are we doing here? And they need to understand that. They need to understand that.
And why should we care about the folks under 35? Because they'll say, well, we have a larger constituency, right? There are other people above 35 that may believe that this is the right thing to do. So you're saying under 35. Why is that so critical to
Because that's kind of 5 years ago I said under 30, right? Now I say under 35, but you can't find anybody of either party who thinks differently on that issue. I mean, it's just very clear. It's just very clear. And, as people get older, like I do, sometimes you get, a little bit more staid or, I don't know what the word is.
Just stuck in your ways, maybe?
Yeah, stuck in your ways a little bit. Other people get more inclusive and more open about, maybe this isn't so bad, right? So I think people my age probably are going through that process. But if you just look at how the young people are feeling about this and how they're being brought up, that's really a good guideline. I mean, these people are now coming into positions of authority. They're not getting in office and all this. And you just, come on, this is pretty obvious where this is all going to wind up. And if you know where it's going to wind up, let's just go ahead and get there.
And still to come is the National Republican Party hurting the chances for local Republicans to win elections. And what about his plans after office? Greg Ballard answers those questions next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Back to Indianapolis This Week, we're talking about Mayor Greg Ballard in his final week in office. So what's in his future and the future for the Republican Party? Once again, the mayor with our Rafael Sanchez.
Beyond the City County Council, you are the last major Republican in Marion County to have an office in this building. What does your party have to do to make a comeback or to hold its positions so it's viable going into the future?
I'm very open about this. I say it to my fellow party members all the time. I spoke after the first debate in Cleveland. I said, it's pretty clear what's happening, and we have to overcome the national party rhetoric. More people are moving into the cities. It's more ethnic in its approach, I guess. We have to be willing to accept everybody. We have to be seen as a welcoming community. We have to embrace everybody. And sometimes that's not the message that people hear. And if we don't go down that path, we are going to be a minority party in the cities for a long time, not just Indianapolis, but every other city, major city in the nation, if we don't figure that out pretty fast.
The last time you and I sat and we talked about your goals for the year, you were hoping to get that Marion County Criminal Justice Center done before you were to leave office. That did not happen. What is the future of that? I mean, is that something that we need, or is that something that's just going to remain on the shelf and maybe someone else will have to take care of it at some other point 10 years from now?
Well, that's something that's been on the shelf for 30 years, right? People have been wanting to do that for a long time, and when it gets involved in the politics, it is what it is. But I've got in my pocket here the signatures in 2013 of the people who said, yes, we need to move forward on that, and that signature includes the president of the council. I've got who voted on the winning bid, which included 2 representatives of the council. So
is that more politics?
I think it probably was by the end because the council was involved from the very beginning, and I've got the documents on my person right now to prove that. But
like really on your person, or you just say that? So do you carry that? Mayor, what, do you carry that just as a reminder? Is that?
I thought you might ask the question.
You thought okay, so fair enough.
So, but you're paying for it now. You're paying for the administration of justice right now, and you're paying more than you should. And if you had the new criminal justice center, because of the synergy of it, the transportation of prisoners would be less, medical care would be less, so much, the number of guards that you needed would be less, all of that, with a new facility that was kind of intact, having the courts over there, it'd all be less money, be a lot safer, because I walk by prisoners 3 to 4 times a week. The mayor walks by the prisoners 3 to 4 times a week in the building. Yeah, you do too.
Everybody does.
I would suggest to you that's probably inherently unsafe.
We have a number of major teams here, the Colts, the Pacers. Can we keep them long term? There's always a discussion about funding for them and taxing and all those things. Are we viable enough to keep those professional teams in the city? And must we keep them to remain viable?
The answer to that is yes, I believe we are. And I do think it's necessary that we keep them because it goes back to quality of life. It goes back to placemaking. It goes back to creating the city that people want to live in. They want arts. They want culture. They do want those. They want density. They want placemaking in their neighborhoods. They also want sports. It's a part of the mix for a major city. You got to have it. Companies aren't going to move to where there aren't pro sports, frankly. They're not going to try to increase their presence. And so that you have to take that into account because they want, their employees are going to want to have a pro sports presence. Just part of it. Just part of it. I believe that strongly. So we have to understand that. There are very few cities in the nation that actually have an NFL team and a full-time symphony. We're one of them. Less than 24 cities can say that. That's a big deal. It's the mix that's important. And we have a good mix right now, and I think soccer will grow. The demographics for soccer are very strong, and hopefully we get the stadium built also because I'd love to get into the MLS for soccer.
You once told me, in fact it was 3 years ago, that when you left office that you'd want to be a high school basketball coach. Do you recall that?
I recall saying that to you.
If you don't recall it, I have the videotape to play.
No, I do recall. It was Christmas.
Yeah.
It was Christmas, I remember.
So have you received any calls?
I have not. That did not engender any calls whatsoever. I'm a little shocked at that. So I may have to go a different path. But, you know, you never really know. And I still got a few years to go here. And so you never really know where it's going to take you, right?
Sir, you have got a different path. And that path is something that's really close to your heart, which is the issue of national security when it comes to less dependence on foreign oil. And you have been meeting with groups across the country talking about that. Is that where we're going to see you next? Are you going to be advocating for those kinds of things as you move into now private life?
I've been asked to speak on that subject pretty much every month for the last year. 25 years ago, when I went to war in the Persian Gulf, we couldn't do it at that point in time. We knew that war was about Iran, and that was okay. We had to keep it all going at that point in time. But 25 years later, with the transportation technology changing, we can move in a different direction. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do, to look at the technology, understand that when you are using as much gasoline as you are, you're making a difference. I start a lot of my talks like this, that when we send troops off to war, we kind of pat them on the back and say thank you for your service. And when they come home, we hold parades for them, welcome them back. And then, you know, unfortunately, when they die over there, we hold funerals, very meaningful funerals for them, and salute them as we bury them. And then we go down the street and fill up the gas tank. And nobody makes that connection. But those are all connected. And we have to understand that now. It's different than it was 25 years ago. We have to understand that when we're filling up that gas tank at the level that we are, we're making sure that our troops continue to go over to the Middle East. We have to change that.
Mayor Ballard, I want to thank you for your time. Best of luck to you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Raphael.
Thank you,
Thanks.
sir.
Our thanks again to Mayor Ballard for his time. So what's Ballard's legacy? Two people who have worked with him answer that question next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week on RTV6. Indianapolis this week. We are joined this Sunday morning by two longtime ITW favorites here, Kip 2 and Robert Vane. Thanks so much for being here. Happy holidays. Happy early New Year to you and your families as well.
Thank you.
We are looking back this morning. We're also looking ahead and talking about Mayor Greg Ballard. And we'll start with the big L question, the legacy of Mayor Ballard. And Kip, let's start with you.
Well, I think if you look at Mayor Ballard's legacy as a politician, you have to say it's an unqualified success. He ran 2 times and won both of them. First one of the biggest upsets in Indiana history, and the second time, I still don't think he was the favorite, and he came out with a W. A lot of people didn't expect it. So as a politician, I would say an unqualified success as a politician. As a mayor of the city of Indianapolis, I think it's much more mixed. I think the second term especially was probably more negative than positive, and I think the reason for that was at the very first thing he did at the beginning of his second term was pass a partisan map, which sort of soured relations with the city-county council from there on in, and that made it difficult for him to accomplish what he wanted to try to accomplish in the second term.
Robert?
I would say Kip's being very gracious, especially part of the political legacy. I mean, Kip's been a county chairman here and been a state chairman. He's certainly qualified to talk about surprises and upsets and legacies of this matter. But Greg Ballard winning mayor of Indianapolis twice is the greatest political achievement of my lifetime. I'm 48 years old. For him to win, and when I say vaunted Democrat political machine in Marion County, that's a compliment. I mean, Peterson won in 2003 by 30-some points. I was administering the elections at the time. I never thought we'd have a Republican mayor in Indianapolis. Seriously, I never did. And every day that I worked for him, I just remember thinking, I just can't believe I'm up here. It's one thing in 2007 to sneak up on someone, whack them on the back of the head, and then run away. In 2011, he had a legacy to run on, a record to run on, and he won again. And remember, 2011, he wins again. 2008, Barack Obama, with Kip 2's help, takes Marion County by 114,000 votes. For the mayor to overcome that voter registration drive in 8 and win again, unparalleled achievement.
You were there in the trenches with Mayor Ballard out of the gate. How did he change over his 2 terms in office, if at all?
I would say this. There were legitimate, and I'm going to use the word fears because that's the word I've used, fears that this fella who nobody knew, corporate class didn't really know, nonprofit class, in terms of the leaders, didn't really know. Certainly the political class didn't know. And I was communications director at the Indiana Republican Party and was working there until just a week before he was elected. No one knew about this guy. No one knew about his priorities. No one knew what he was going to do. For those of us who grew up here, Kip and I included, I never went downtown when I was a kid except to go see Dick the Bruiser. Now look where we are. A lot of people were afraid of that legacy that Democrats and Republicans had built. And what he has done, what he has overcome in terms of expectations, it's astonishing how much different he has been as mayor as people thought he would be as mayor, just because he was an unknown quantity.
If he could change one thing, Robert, what do you think he would go back in time to possibly redo?
My sense is he would want to do more of the things he's already done. He'd want more bike lanes. He'd want more trails. He'd want more development. He'd want to create more jobs. But just for example, go to the east side of downtown or go to Irvington. It's never always been about downtown. Go to Irvington and see how much different that is. Rebuild Indy, hundreds of millions of dollars in construction projects. Re-engineering Deep Rock Tunnel saved ratepayers $800 million. The list goes on and on. I don't think that he would evince some many regrets. He would just be like, man, I wish we had done more of what we had done.
Kip, kind of a similar question, serving on the council itself. When you look at Vision Fleet, you look at Blue Indy and some of those deals, do you think he would have handled relations with the council differently, seeing how things turned out?
Well, if I were him, I would have, and I think the incoming mayor, Joe Hogsett, has already tried to chart a different path when it comes to those things. I noticed last night he had a bipartisan dinner with leaders of both caucuses and other members. Mayor Ballard never did any of those things, and I think it really tarnishes his legacy. In my eyes, certainly, he could have had a very successful second term had he treated the council differently than he did. But as I said, he started off, the very first thing he did second term was sign maps that were very partisan maps, and I think it soured the relations with them.
So when the Democrats were in charge, they have Cinderella, they had Mother Teresa drawing the maps. I mean, I was there. I mean, some of the maps that were drawn.
It was an unprecedented move. You know, no one's done it before or since, where it was a lame duck city county council who passed maps, even though they'd lost. they passed Republican maps, and the first thing he did on day one was sign those maps. And it was a Democratic council coming in, and they resented it, and it soured relations. He should have not done that, and he should have worked with the incoming Democratic council.
And did the maps get sued? Were they upheld? Did they go?
The maps went to the Supreme Court.
And
I am an officer of the court, and I'm not going to make a comment about it.
They were upheld by the Indiana Supreme Court.
We'll continue this debate and discussion on our Twitter feed right now at Indianapolis This Week. Gentlemen, thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Happy early New Year to you. You're watching Indianapolis This Week only on RTV6. Right here on RTV6 as we team up with our Scripps sister stations to shine a spotlight on police force in America. Is it really on the rise? Law enforcement experts join us to talk about the fragile relationship police face with their communities right now. Plus the big change they're calling on for departments from Indianapolis to those all across the country. Focus on Force airs only on RTV6 today at 1 p.m. Catch it as it airs or set your DVR now. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we're sitting down with Governor Mike Pence on the year that's ending and what lies ahead in 2016. Thanks for watching.
You're watching